And Jen was just saying sometimes people, even in Buddhist countries, born into families who are Buddhist, so they're Buddhist from birth, but still they haven't reached the real time where their spiritual practice is starting to flourish. So they might live very close to temples and the teachings, and yet not go to the temples, not really listen to the teachings or have practice until the time is right, their conditions are right, their own personal life, their spiritual practice, the conditions come up so that they become maybe interested, or maybe it's a friend or someone else, or some cause, some reason brings them to the temple, to the monastery to hear the teachings. He said his monastery is in Luang province, which is about 2.5 hours drive from Bangkok. Some of the local people, they'll come to the monastery obviously, and they only come and say they have friends in Bangkok who have heard of his monastery and want to come and listen to teachings, and they ring their friends up who live very close and say, "Oh, where's the monastery?" And they say, "Oh, I'm not sure." And then they have to find out so that they're sort of not embarrassed by their friends, and then they come with their friends, bring them, and then they say, "Oh, never knew there was a monastery here, never listened to the teachings before." He said spiritual practice is like this. Sometimes we need some kind of a cause, some kind of a stimulus for us to start thinking about the spiritual life. And the spiritual life is, you say, finding the Buddha inside. First of all, you have to find the Buddha outside, meaning you have to find the temple, find the teaching. But the purpose of it is to find the Buddha inside our own hearts, our own minds. And that's what we're doing when we practice the Dhamma. Another example of this is, say, this monastery, Buddha Bodhiwana Monastery here. Before it wasn't here, 5 years ago this didn't exist. And so many of the people who are coming here now regularly, they perhaps at that time, you can say their karma, their old good karma that they practiced Buddhism, had faith in Buddhism maybe in previous lives, hadn't yet come to fruition. So they're still not going to temples, not that interested because they've got other things on their mind. But then this monastery has come up now over the last 5 years, so there are many people who come here regularly, listen to the teachings and practice. And you could say karmically, that's the fruit of their past good karma is now coming up, and they have a chance, they can come and listen to the teachings, and they can, as it were, continue on their practice, maybe from a past life they were practicing, and now can carry on practicing in this life. You could compare the Buddhist teachings, the Dhamma, with, say, what we have here around this monastery. We have the nature of trees and mountains, and perhaps in the past, before you knew this place, you didn't realise, there's this place where there's these trees, these mountains, very peaceful, quiet surroundings. When you come here, then you get to know, it's like this, there's these trees, these mountains around here. And the Dhamma is like this. The Dhamma is always there. The truth of reality is always there. It's just often we don't understand it or don't see it or don't know it. And the role of the Buddha is, he's one who you can say is discovered or rediscovered the truth that is already there. He revealed it, he understood it through his own practice, the true nature of our existence, and then taught it to us and taught it to people. The teachings have been preserved, say, in the books, the scriptures, but what he was talking about was just what is the true nature of reality. And in the most succinct or the shortest way, you could say what he's teaching is that all conditioned things arise and then pass away. Because the nature of a conditioned thing is it arises, depends on certain conditions, it arises and then it passes away because those conditions change. That's a very simple teaching, but very deep, very profound, and it affects all of aspects of our life, both the physical world, the material world, and the mental world. And the Buddha said over and over again to really look inwardly to see this truth, look into your own mind and understand it there. It's there all the time, but we just have to really learn to see it, observe these truths. Just doing what most people do normally is to always try to find happiness and understand the world through external things, so try to develop the world materially. So we develop our countries, our cities, our towns, the economy, every aspect of our life. We develop on the external level, the material level, but often we're not looking inwardly to find out about these truths which will help us to bring us true understanding, true peace of mind. So this is the purpose of the Buddha as the teacher of this, say a way of getting to understand truth by looking inwards. And then it's what you have to do also, it's what you have to do in your practice, is look at your own heart and get to see the truth, the true nature that is there all the time. The fact that this body, this mind, they're conditioned things that arise, pass away. When you can see that, what it does, the effect on the mind is it allows the mind to let go of attachments. Because if you can see something is impermanent and subject to change, then you know, oh, I'll have to let go of it, I'll have to leave it. There's no point trying to cling on to something that's impermanent, that you can't cling on to. But you have to first of all see that and understand that before you can really let go of your attachment. Are there any questions today? He asked, anyone want to ask anything? The question was about how do we deal with what we call pests, different insects, animals that come into our house, or in this case into a restaurant where you have to keep the place clean. And obviously the animals, the insects are very stubborn, they want food and they want comfort, so it's quite hard to get rid of them. Ajahn was advising, well, in some cases you can use prevention. There are different things you can buy, chemicals and things to help prevent them coming. If it's a bigger animal like a rat or a mouse, then there are the traps that don't kill them. They're like cages or boxes with a door, and you have some bait inside. They come in and the door closes, and you can go and take them away, a long way away from where you live, out into the bush or the park or something, and let them go, rather than killing them. But he also said, living in this world, we also have to have the understanding that everything is subject to its karma, and then little creatures, particularly insects, say like ants or something, there's always going to be a certain amount of death around us. That it's very difficult to move around and do things in the world without harming insects sometimes, but this isn't harming, deliberate harming. This is just, the accidental and the unavoidable, say, squashing of insects. When you drive a car, you get insects squashed onto your windscreen, or you light a candle at night, bugs will fly to it and burn and die. Your intention is not to kill, but it's the way of the world that there'll be some of this going on, and to recognise that, not take it as a personal failing, or as you're making some bad karma if different insects are getting squashed or hurt in that way. As far as keeping your place clean goes, you try your best to keep it clean, and so you're sweeping or you're cleaning, and maybe sometimes a few small bugs die because they get caught up, and even then you can see your intention isn't to kill, your intention is just cleaning, and sometimes it's just unfortunate some of the bugs get hurt. But that's different from actually going out with poisons and baits and things and actually trying to deliberately kill them. Then you say making bad karma or breaking the first precept. So you try to get that understanding clear in your mind, and then just try and find a skillful way to deal with the pests without killing them. Practicing with the first precept, we establish that clear intention in the mind that we're not going to kill other people, other animals, other beings. And generally with anything fairly large, or going down to say the level of a rat or something, you can do that, and you can find ways to deal with the problems without having to kill. With the very small creatures, say insects and things, then you just have to do the best you can in the situation you find yourself in, what is appropriate. You can still have that basic intention that you're not trying to kill or deliberately kill things, but if in the course of cleaning your restaurant or cleaning up some bugs are harmed, then you might have to accept, well, that's their karma, because you can't, it's very difficult to work around every ant, every bug, because often there's so many, and there might be some that get harmed, but you just do the best you can in the situation you find yourself. Any other questions? The question was about Ajahn Anan's personal history and living with Luang Chah, our teacher. He said he spent his first 4 years at Wat Nongapong, the monastery where Luang Chah lived and taught, and was very close to Luang Chah. And the following few years, that was started, he ordained in 1976, and then after 4 years he spent some time in other monasteries. There's one on the edge of Bangkok, there's some land that was offered, but he would still be coming back to see and be close to Luang Chah, and was still very much under his guidance. Then in 1983 Luang Chah fell ill, and that's about the time that Ajahn Anan travelled to Rayong, where he lives now, in the style we call Tudong, so wandering actually without a fixed destination, just wandering with a few personal possessions and camping in the forest. And the monastery he lives at now began just like that, just to be invited by some farmers to camp in a forest where they offered food and there was water to bathe, living very simply the first few months. And then they said, well, please stay on, and they started building a few huts, and the monastery started that way in about 1984, and he's been there ever since. He's been there 23 years. Luang Chah was very ill from 1983 till 91, 92 when he died. So that last period, although he's living in Rayong where he lives now, he was still commuting back to the monastery regularly many times a year to help nurse Luang Chah, visit him until he died. But he's been in the monastery where he's now 23 years, and it's now very well established, many buildings, and very well known. The question was asking Ajahn to talk a little bit about the way Luang Chah taught. So Ajahn said that Luang Chah was a very diligent teacher. He'd be teaching people every day and generally getting them to find ways and finding skillful means by which to help them, to get them to let go of their moods of stress and suffering that they all normally would have and get caught into. And this he did by getting them to let go of their attachments in different ways. And that, you could say, that was the flavour of his teachings, getting people to let go, and let go on every level. So on the level of sila, letting go of the things that led them to break precepts, make bad karma. Let go on the level of samadhi, let go of their own inner thoughts and distractions, worries, different moods. And then on the level of wisdom as well, getting them to see the very impermanent nature of all our thoughts and moods that we normally take as a self and say, oh, I'm stressed, I'm angry, I'm depressed, all the different kinds of stress. Getting them to see those are actually conditions of mind, that when we see that they're impermanent conditions of mind, then we're able to let them go, not attach to them so much. And some of the different stories he mentioned, say maybe somebody would come to Luang Chah and they maybe say, oh, I'm very stressed trying to look after my children are really stubborn, giving me a lot of trouble. And Luang Chah would just say, well, who wanted the children? Whose decision was it to have the children? And they sort of, well, stop, think, oh, yeah. And then he said, so maybe, we'll give it's them 50%, but maybe you have to take 50% of the blame as well. And so people, not only they get maybe a laugh out of it, but they also realise, maybe some of the stress that we build up in our mind, it's not all what we think it is. It's not all their fault or this fault. Sometimes it's just our own attachments and clinging that is the cause of the stress. Or say in teaching precepts, most of the villagers around Luang Chah, they had to go and find their food every day. They grow rice, but they also have to hunt and gather, and a lot of them are catching fish, frogs, different animals for their meals. But every day Ajahn Chah will be teaching, well, don't kill. And obviously in the monastery they sort of smile and say yes, and then they go home and they have to find their food, so they have to go out and kill. But because he kept teaching in different ways every day over many years. Some people, they would start to change. They start to think maybe it's not the best way, the best thing to kill. So he's just giving an example of one man who would catch frogs every day for his meal, and he brings them back and you have to break the legs and then do different things to them and then cook them. But after a while he thought, I can't do this. But he had a wife and kids and they've got to eat, so he'd bring his bucket of frogs and things back from the fields, and he'd just leave it on the table and walk away. And his wife was like, why isn't he helping do the food today? And get a bit upset, but he was just firm, I'm not going to do anything more. He'd just leave his bucket there, so she'd have to do it. Then later on, he'd leave the bucket on the table, and so after a few more weeks, months of hearing Dhamma talks and thinking about it, then later on, when she wasn't around, he'd leave the bucket there. When she wasn't around, he'd actually take the bucket, let them all go again. He didn't want them to die, he didn't even want her to kill them. So then the wife, what are we going to eat? You're going to keep the 5 precepts now, we're all going to starve. But if you're firm, then you start to find other ways you can eat. You can buy food, you can do other things. So little by little, he could affect people who even, maybe had to kill for their living, and get them to change that. Or if it was people trading, and business people, or in trade, say like there's a pig farmer. The pig farmer would come to Luang Chah and say, it's terrible, the economy's terrible, the price of pork, it's going down, I'm not getting as much profit as I used to. And Luang Chah would just say, well, I don't see the pigs complaining, and I never see them arguing about the price of their meat, and who are the ones who are giving up their lives to provide this meat? And so the man thought, that's true, at least I might get less profit, but at least I'm better off than the pigs. Just giving them simple reflections like that, to let go of the things that would cause them stress, and to see that there's always a different way of looking at things, and there's different ways you can look at life to let go of your attachments, so that you can bring your mind to more peace. You can say that even though Luang Chah himself is dead now, his teachings and he himself live on through his teachings. We can still be, you can say, a student of Luang Chah, because we can read the books, listen to the talks on tapes, and meet his other disciples who are kind of living lineage that comes from him. So it's still possible to practice and receive benefit from the things that he was teaching. Just as the same as the Buddha, even though the Buddha, the physical Buddha, the flesh and blood Buddha is dead now, long ago, but Buddhism and the Buddha live on in the teachings, and we can practice them any day. And when we are practicing them, then we're as if seeing the Buddha. When there's a famous teaching, you see the Dhamma, you see the Buddha, you see the Buddha, you see the Dhamma. And Jen was just talking about the powerful effects of Luang Chah's teachings, that people can remember particular talks he gave, and often to people who are sick or elderly, and it could have a really revitalizing effect on them. One of the most amazing stories Ajahn just said was there's one man whose son used to come to his monastery in Rayong, and he was an elderly man who was pretty much paralyzed, bedridden for 10 years, couldn't walk and couldn't really speak or do anything for himself. He was totally dependent on his family to look after him. And then his son got a copy of a very famous talk Ajahn Chah gave to another person who was very sick, called Our Real Home, which we have copies of here, and just played it to him. His father's lying in bed, just played it to him on the tape for many days, just over and over again. And then just out of the blue one day, his father just sat up and started to talk and could move his limbs. And they say, as in an unmade joke, if it happened at the night, his family would probably all thought he was a ghost. But it happened in the day, and he could talk and move around just like a normal person. And this is the result of the good karma of listening to the Dhamma and the effect on the mind, bringing up these positive mind states, positive thoughts. And he was fine for 9 days, and then he lay down again and he died. But at least for the 9 last days of his life, he actually was like a normal person. And this is and that when in those 9 days he recalled that the night before he got out and could start speaking and moving around again, he had a vision of Ajahn Chah coming. At that time Ajahn Chah wasn't anywhere nearby, he was in Luang, but Ajahn had a vision of Ajahn Chah coming with many, many monks. And he had this great sense of joy arise in his heart, and it's that sense of joy and the happiness of the Dhamma, hearing the Dhamma, contemplating the Dhamma, that changed everything, changed his state of mind, and that affected his health as well. He could actually sit up and walk around. And Ajahn was just talking a bit more about India, saying that one of the things you learn when you go to India, you see a very old, ancient civilization that hasn't changed much. The beliefs, the faith of the people, majority are Hindus, and you say, there's some of their beliefs are quite practical, and some of their practices, say like when people die in India, they don't spend a lot of money on lavish funerals, they just get whatever wood and things they have that they can make a fire with, and they burn the person and they float them off onto the Ganges river so that they say they go off to meet God that way. Very simple. Maybe the belief is incorrect that they'll go off to meet God, but the actual practice is a very practical one. So probably those beliefs, whatever you say now to them, they're not going to change those beliefs. They're very firm in their different beliefs. Say in God and the Hindu system, they're very fixed in that. It'll probably only be the next Buddha who comes along to India and would be able to teach them and give them faith in the Buddhist path. But still there's a lot of good things you can see there when you go to, say, Varanasi, where the Buddha gave his first sermon. You stop there, you see that the city hasn't changed for 2,500 years. It's still got the same name as the time of the Buddha. The people are much the same. You can't open. People want to open big supermarkets and department stores, so they can't do it because people don't want to change. They're not interested in accepting sort of more Western, modern things. He's just talking about the growth of Buddhism and saying how Buddhism the teachings don't really stay still. If you think about it historically, you look at how Buddhism, say particularly in the time of Emperor Asoka, a few hundred years after the Buddha's death, put a lot of effort into sending Buddhist monks out and supporting the religion both in India, spreading it around India, then to Sri Lanka, and then later on it spread across to Burma and Thailand. And that's the way Buddhism has been. It's often been expanding to new horizons, new cultures, and being taken on by those cultures. And now look, you see the effect of Ajahn Chah's teachings. He himself travelled to England, and now Buddhism is very strong there. There's many monasteries, a lot of interest. And many of Ajahn Chah's disciples travelled to Australia. So now there's more monasteries starting in Australia, and it's quite possible in the future keep expanding all around Australia. Maybe one day Australia will be a Buddhist country, you don't know. But that's the way Buddhism is, isn't it? You look, India, it's faded from India now, but countries that weren't originally Buddhist, like Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, have become Buddhist countries. Maybe one day it will fade from Asia, you don't know, and maybe Australia, England and other countries will be Buddhist countries. Once you contemplate like this to see it, the impermanence of things, which is your success in your families, your business, your studies, everything.